So, fakes, forgeries, fakes, counterfeits, and reproductions. First, we'll start off with some definitions, and then we'll look into fakes, forgeries, counterfeits, reproductions, and some miscellaneous ones that don't fall into any of those categories. Definitions. Ken Pugh has published a reference on this in 2001. Counterfeit stamps that are, in this case, produced to defraud Canada Post or the postal authorities, made for use in the mail, but not targeted at collectors. Fake and actual stamp. So there's an A there, AC, AK, actual stamp or cover, which has been fraudulently altered. Examples include false cancellations, surcharges, overprints, perforations, imperfect margins, etc., applied to an actual stamp. And that's how I'm trying to remember it, as AK as actual. Or jury is an unauthorized reproduction of a genuine stamp with the express intent of defrauding the collector, made from virgin material. There's the G. Forgery is virgin material, new paper, basically. Facsimile, reproduction, reprint, basically just copies of rare stamps. They're not really significant interest to collectors. We get them, but they're not really of any importance generally. There are now philatelic counterfeits. There's a counterfeit used in the mails, but the objective was to create a philatelic item. I've done that. I've used a counterfeit stamp with proper postage just to get the counterfeit stamp canceled. Philatelic forgeries. These are forgeries made to target the forgery collecting market. They make them and they don't intend to, they present them. They're pretty obvious usually. Bogus. These are the interesting ones. Any stamp, overprint, cancellation, which never existed in genuine form. I've got lots of examples of those. And the fantasy phantom, those are bogus ones for a fictitious postal authority. A few examples of those too. So now if we look at the fake ones made from an actual stamp, reperforated fake covers, markings, paper, surcharge, steamship marking, rebacking a stamp, trimming the perfs, stationery cutouts, fake holes, OHMS holes, those are the perfin holes, fake CDS, cancels on them, miscut souvenir sheet, chemical wash to remove color. Those are examples. In the presentations, everything is in my collection except this one. And I've had to have included it, but I've made the note, obviously. This is a very interesting one. A number 4XI, three-sided beaver on thin paper, comes with the Vincent Green certificate. But number 4 is only issued imperforate. So how can you get a number 4, the imperf stamp, with perforations and a certificate? Well, this is the eBay item. This is an actual number 4, a brown red imperf, which is how it was issued. And here's an actual number 12, which is that same stamp issued in 58-59 with perforations. Perf 11 3/4. This is perf 12. So how can you, so you can see the challenge here. It's a mixture of an actual number 4 and an actual number 12, but it's neither. Seller describes it as with the certificate. When there's a listing with that references a certificate, it usually implies that the stamp is genuine. The certificates are printed on green paper if they're genuine, and on pink paper if they're forgeries or some other not genuine. When I asked for the certificate, he sent it to me. The certificate is on pink paper. It doesn't show up very well in the scan, but yes, it is pink. It does confirm the color, which is the XI, and that fake perforations added, measuring 12 by 12. I offered him $50 for it. He declined. He's being honest in calling it a number 4IX, but I think he's hoping that a buyer will think, oh, the seller made a mistake and it's actually a number 12. Well, it's not a number 12. Here is the reperforated, another stamp has been reperforated. It's a number 2, again, made to look like the expensive number 13, which is the perforated versions of these early issues. And again, The difference here is that the paper is wrong. This is on laid paper, and number 13 is on wove paper. Another reperforated fake. I think you can pretty well see the perforations on this one. It's quite, when we look at this corner of the stamp and magnify it, you can see these are the genuine perforations, and suddenly somebody's decided to reperforate it. Why? This isn't an expensive stamp. There's not a lot of value to the stamp. I'm not sure why they would do it, but you can also see the difference in the perforations there. And a certificate that's been reperforated on the right side, another pink certificate. Here's a number 4 VI, major reentry. This particular issue, number 4, the Threepenny Beaver, is a very popular one amongst collectors. And there are various major reentries that by which you can identify the position on the plane, on the printing plate. Here we're looking at the stamp, and certainly what we're looking for in the major reentry from position 34 is a tripling here of the bottom of the 3, a little tripling up here. We see doubling or tripling on the bottom on this right-hand corner, and again, more marks up here. These marks are just reflections of the top of the 3. And the big obvious mark in the re-entry, where the printing plate has been re-entered and double printed here in this oval. You see a fine line here in the oval, and then another line there, and then in the margin. Those are all, this is a guaranteed pure position 34. There's no doubt about that. And it's got very nice margins on it all the way around. Very fine in terms of that grade. What we're looking at here, and this is the reference, Ralph Trimble, on his website, reentries.com. He's unfortunately passed away in the last couple of years, but he shows the reentry, and the reentries Ken Kershaw provided the stamps, but we see the same doubling in each corners, and we see this doubling in the oval. This is all part of one reentry. These are not called in the plural term. It's not 3 entries on this stamp. Those are one reentry from one application of the transfer roll. Why is this a fake then? I mean, the stamp is 100% genuine, but it wasn't on the cover at the time it was stamped. If we look closely at the stamp, we can see the cancellation from the oval here. It stops, it doesn't continue. And here we have another cancellation that's going underneath the stamp. So this is a genuine stamp applied to a cover. Here's also a bit of an ink here. Target cancel. It doesn't cover the stamp. And here's a little bit of an here, big one. And here another little bit of an ink pen cancel that should have been on the cover too. So here's clear signs that this was applied to a cover afterwards from some other cover, presumably. The stamp is genuine, cover is fake. Catalog value of the very fine stamp is just $1,200. On cover, it's $1,300. So not sure why that was what was done. Here we have a fake money letter marking. This is an example from June of 1855. Registration, money letters was the precursor to registration. So in May 1st of 1855, Canada Post, or the postal authorities removed the money letter use of money letters and replaced it all with registered. So if you were sending money, or you now had the letters registered instead of having them with a hand stamp called money letter. But this is a fake money letter. There are 6 approved official money letters from Montreal. Here's another one, another fake money letter cancel. Somebody's applied it to a cover afterwards. This is 2 years later again, 1857. They put a money letter and registered. Someone was playing. We know the dealer I have spoken to about this suspects the story, but there's a bit of history here. Someone was collecting money letters, and a bunch of his friends decided to play some tricks on him. And here's how they're advertised in this Eastern Lot description. One is from Queenston, one is from Lindsay, Ontario, and one is from St. Ratford. Well, there is no place in Ontario called St. Ratford. I think we'll see this cancel was actually, it's the city, which you may have heard of, is called Stratford, without the period, where Shakespearean theater goes on. This is another fake money letter. Fake money letter. and an 1840 make letter. Now, this is particularly interesting because it's the kind of rabbit holes that we as collectors like to go into. Why would someone be applying a fake money letter cancel to an 1840 letter? Well, interesting. It's addressed to in Queenston, Ontario, Queenston, yeah, in Upper Canada at the time. James paid 1 shilling 9 pence to send whatever he was sending off to the Registrar Court Probate in Toronto. On the back, we see in this printing here in manuscript, February 20th, 1840, Alexander Hamilton Esquire, will, entered and some initials there. The actual date of the cancellation is February 19th. So this is a receiver on the 20th marking on the back that this letter came from Alexander Hamilton. It contained his will. Who was Alexander Hamilton? He died February 19th, 1839. So I guess within the rules at the time, within 1 year of the death of someone, their will had to be sent to the registrar of court probates for registering the will. So, and he did, whoever the trustee was, sent it exactly a year later after Alexander Hamilton died. Who was Alexander Hamilton? Fourth son of Robert and Catherine Hamilton. Robert was a very successful businessman. He made money by transporting things around Niagara Falls. Queenston, the village or town of Queenston is on right at the foot of Niagara Falls. And so he made his money carrying stuff from Lake Erie down to Lake Ontario. His wife was Catherine. The city of St. Catharines is rumored to be named after her. There's conflicting Catharines that could have been named after. But the St. Catharines is the leading opinion is that it was named after Robert's wife. Alexander, he served in the War of 1812, mayor of Queenston, sheriff, and a postmaster. So here we have the postmaster died. He was postmaster in 1826. Here's a letter addressed to him. Alexander Hamilton, Esquire, postmaster of Queenston, and it started at least within 1826. This is his home, the Willow Bank. It's still on the Niagara River Parkway near Niagara Falls on the Canadian side. This is a picture from Google Maps. But what else was his story about Alexander Hamilton? He, in June of 1838, as part of the Upper Canada Rebellion, there was an American named James Monroe who came across the Niagara River with a bunch of other patriots, and they felt that they could find some Canadians here who would support them and defeat the British and get British out of Canada. So they attacked some British forces, set the tavern on fire near Thorold, which is near St. Catharines, just across the Niagara River. They were captured, condemned to death, but the sentences were commuted, and instead they were transported to Van Diemen's Land, which was the practice for criminals to be transported there. One rebel had to be hanged as a deterrent. When the executioner failed to appear to carry out the sentence of death on James Monroe, one of the leaders of the raid, Alexander Hamilton, our postmaster, performed it himself until 30th of July, 1838, having arranged as an act of kindness that Monroe drop 18 feet before the rope snapped his neck. He was later complimented by the government for his cool and firm manner in which the execution was performed. On July 30th, James Monroe professed his faith in God, was received into the Catholic Church, baptized, and on the 31st, he was executed. He's buried in a grave near Niagara-on-the-Lake. The reason the postmaster was charged with the responsibility of carrying out the execution was because the normal executioner didn't show up for work that day. So not very often happened that postmasters also become executioners. Here's the sources. Wonderful. There's so much information on and available on the internet at different sources. Wikipedia, Bruce G. Wilson, and then his Dictionary of Canadian Biography and Niagara Now publication. Fascinating story. A little digression from fakes, but it's interesting because it has a fake money letter cancel on it. Here's a large queen, number 22, fake. Well, it looks really nice to me. Here are the laid paper lines. This stamp is very rare on laid paper, but The certificate says these are faked laid paper lines. Someone has taken the use stamp, soaked it up, soaked it in water, and placed it on what they believed was the right sized mesh, because it's the laid paper lines in the paper when the paper's dried, and but presumably because the spacing is incorrect, he didn't get it quite right, and the Vincent Graves Green Foundation said, "Oops, this is not a genuine number 12." These are some Port provisionals, fakes. These provisionals were very rare stamps that were when Canada Postage needed more 1 and 2 cent stamps. When they reduced their postage rates, they used this particular post office in Nova Scotia, trimmed the 3 cent stamp into a 1/3 stamp and called a 1, and a 2/3 stamp. The other 2/3 had a 2 on it. And here's the 2/3 stamp in the imprint, overprint. But this was sold on eBay, but it was sold as fakes. And they provided the certificate with it. It says, this is an American philatelic exporting service in Waterford, Michigan. And yes, these are not, they are close. They got the colors right. The purple and the blue and black, so there's black and purple. But these numbers are just simply too big in relation to the 3 to be considered a genuine number 2, a genuine Fort Hood provisional. So this is the SS Revers Dennis. This postal marking, usually it implies that the cover was carried on the steamship, River Denny. In this case, this was just a very clever, somewhat opportunistic, if you want to call it. There is a town in Nova Scotia called River Denny. And in this case, this was meant to be, they created these steamship markings. There never was an SS River Denny. This really meant South Side. So here's a lot of information on the internet. A young enterprise came across several covers addressed to the SS River Denny, meaning South Side. And then they created several paquebot and steamboat mail cancellations. It's not a ship, it's a town. Here's an example of the original letter, SS River Denny. So there's a whole town that became a boat. Wonderful information on the internet about it. So yes, you can even have a fake paquebot cancellation. Here's another fake. Boy, this one looks really good. I wouldn't have been able to tell that it was a fake if the seller hadn't warned me of it. It's fabulous centering for this series, this issue. But this back looks pretty good, but it has been expertly rebacked. Now, how you do that, I don't know. But if you're on watching out for stamps, I'm sure in watermark fluid, you would be able to see this. Looks like there's a little bit of a difference in this white area here versus the other area back here. So it looks like it's been rebacked somehow. An art I'm not experienced with. Here's another imperf single, again a fake. For this particular issue, there are 2 dies that were used, die 1 and die 2. And to distinguish between the dies, it has to do with this margin line. And this sort of caught my eye down here. So I looked at it, this looks okay. The fact that this is a single, double, single means it's die 2. So it's clearly die 2. What this just looks like an ink smudge in here. But only when I looked at that closely did I see, oh, look at this, what we have here. What are these things here? This was a perforated stamp that was carefully trimmed, but they left just a hint of the perfs, and this is the proper spacing for perf 12. So I think we can be pretty confident they took a wide margin stamp, wide margin perforated one, perhaps from the edge of the sheet, and tried to make it the valuable imperf. It was issued as an imperf stamp, or available as an imperf. This one is not, purely fake. But in the context, this was an actual stamp that was modified, like all of these fakes that we've been looking at. Actual stamps modified. Here's a half-inch, half-cent King George V scroll. Most people probably have never seen the half-cent stamp. It's not listed in the catalog. And looks like it's got a little bit of perforations at the top here. Well, that's all fake. There it is here. These are cutouts taken from a piece of postal stationery, a postal postcard at the time, which had a half-cent rate. And so someone needed an extra cent to make up the 3-cent rate and took out postal stationeries. Of course, post office caught it and made it postage due, 2 cents, double the deficiency. They gave the sender the credit for these two, and because there's 1 cent deficient, had to pay 2 cents postage due. Double the deficiency. Here's an OHMS, doubled fake. It's also, you can imagine these kind of varieties that have OHMS and doubled OHMS over, those are even more special. But it's really clear then we look at it from the back. These perforations are not clearly punched through. And that's the obvious tell that this is a fake. The proper OHMS stamps are clearly punched through. If you'd been a little more careful and got them punched through carefully, it could have been, so that's one reason I don't buy any OHMS stamps that are not on cover, because they are so easy to reproduce and fake the OHMS overprints on them. The whole exhibit in a show 2 years ago, the judges finally told the exhibitor, saying, this is all basically, throw it away. It's all garbage. Put a lot of time and effort into the exhibit too. Booklet paints with a fake CDS. This is just page 1. Here's another one. You can see these faint black rings made to look like a nice CDS cancel. There's one here. There's a touch of one on these. There's another touch of one down here. Here's more of them, all with fake CDS cancels. Page 3 of them. All 12 of these have these fake CDS cancels. I bought these from FEH Stamps in Vancouver. He's one of my favorite dealers. I probably bought more stuff from him, at least in terms of quantity, than any other Canadian dealer, or any dealer worldwide for that matter. This was in 2022. In 2024, 2 years after I bought them, I finally got to looking at them. I'm a little bit behind in looking at stamps. Collection of 27 used, and I noted which ones are okay and came up with a wonderful solution with Frank that I didn't have to pay for the ones that were obviously fake, and we prorated it in terms of catalog value, so it worked out really, really well. And the same seller also had a second lot afterwards, which I also bought because I like booklet panes canceled, but Frank fortunately was able to let me keep them, so they're in the presentation. Here is a miscut stainless souvenir sheet, sorry. Again, fake. It's a genuine piece. It's a genuine piece of paper, genuine stamp here's the genuine, it's from the press pane. And the edges are not as cleanly cut. And the SS is actually a little bit wider. So there was a press pane of 12 of these souvenir sheets that you could buy. And someone bought it and didn't quite get, you can see a little bit of up here. They didn't use as sharp a shear as was done by the professionals. Here's another one I bought from China knowing it was fake. Partial missing gold. Well, when we look at the stoplights, as we call them, or whatever you want to call them, this 4-color plus gold foil, so the gold is there. It was on the printing plate. But why is it missing from this rooster and not that one? Well, that's the interesting part. But when you look at it under UV light, you can see that whatever someone has washed it with, and in washing it, not only did they remove the tagging, they removed the gold foil. It's interesting that the gold foil also had a silver foil element to it. So whatever they did, it's a bit of magic, mystery, to remove just the gold. Maybe it oxidized in bleach, and that changed the gold to silver or something. Mystery, but definitely a fake. So that's all the different kinds of fakes that are highlighted here in the presentation. They are actual stamps, altered to make it something more valuable. Here we're going to look at some forgeries made from virgin material. The beaver, some Queen Victorias, another beaver. Jubilees are very popular, making forgeries. We'll look at them. Here we have the mint no gum block of 4, obviously a forgery. and the paper was not right. But it was interesting because each of the 4 stamps had some feature about it, either the dot in the end, a mark in the E, another dot in the E there, or mark over here in the margin. It would be interesting to see where those 4 points should be able to tell me what part of the pane these actually came from originally. But it was just a photocopy of some kind on from some book or probably or something like that, some high quality copy. Here's an engraved forgery on cardstock, mint with the genuine. Here's the genuine. It's pretty good for an engraved forgery. When we look at the lines, we see, oh, there's still nice dots throughout the 4 heads, and everything looks pretty good, but it's not. And we get up here, the lettering just isn't quite the same. It's not the quality of the scan, it's the actual quality of the engraving. But it's close. This is a genuine with a certificate to show that this is what the genuine does look like. Oneglia. Oneglia was a famous forger. We see some of his stamps, both Canadian and Newfoundland stamps, and he's forged them. We're going to look at it closely. Italian printer, very famous. Arrested for selling forgeries to stamp dealers, but he wasn't trying to make money by selling forgeries as stamps. He was drawing attention to the fact that he, as an artist, could create a stamp that would fool the experts at the time. That's all he was doing. He was creating work to fool dealers, to show that it could be done. And he was arrested. And then when he produced 30 copies of the one forgery, and he said, look, I'm doing these myself. And he explained it even after it had been certified by the judges in the court, saying, yes, this is a genuine, you're selling it. And bottom line is, closely associated with Panelli and Sperati, both either forgers at the time. But how do we tell the Oneglia forgery from the 3-penny beaver regular version? Well, here's the forgery, and here's the genuine. He's forged the number 12, but it's actually, I'm comparing it to the same image on the imperfed version, which is a number 4. Imperf 3-penny beaver. And here we're looking at the forgery and the genuine. But the beaver, I looked carefully and I could not see any differences. He's got every little detail in here. There's a bit of a difference in the separation of the margin line. This margin line is a little closer in the genuine than it is in the forgery. Here's another example. We're looking at the lettering here. We're starting to see more differences. The serif, the little accents, if you want to call them, on the ends of the letters are a little more pronounced on a genuine. He wasn't quite as careful when he did the forgeries of the letters, recreated engravings of the letters. The lettering is a giveaway. Here we see it again in the 3. And here on the 3, he even missed entirely the vertical bar. And in Canada, again, the lettering is different. The big difference and the tell is up in the corners. In the forgery, we just see some grid lines. On the genuine, we see ornaments, background, quite a different shape to the 3 and quite a different, obviously different look. So when we go back to the earlier slide, you can see the difference in the corners. It's quite obvious. So to tell, I went through using a stamp analyzer app. I was curious to know how accurate Panelli was in his forgeries in terms of the dimensions of the stamp. And the stamp analyzer app is a tool that measures the perforations. And in this case, I was using the ruler function. There's a bottom down here is a ruler function, 1200 DPI. What's important here, perforations 11.16, 11 and a quarter. I wasn't looking at for the forgery, the perforations. I was looking at, and what stamp analyzer is a very powerful tool. There's a whole YouTube presentation on that available. Sparks, the seller, called it 11.1 by 10.75. It was close. I was using it here. In the bottom down here, there's a measuring tool. When you highlight down here on the circle, if you select measuring tool, you are given the opportunity, you get a white line or pink green line, and you can drag it and measure the distance. Well, I put the end here and the end here. So on the genuine stamp, it's 1.77 centimeters, and here's 1.80. For me, Panelli did a fabulous job on the dimensioning of the oval. Here it's 2.26 and 2. It could easily be my the 10,000th of an inch where I put the cursor point. So it's a very accurate in terms of the I'm sorry, the Oneglia Forgeries in terms of their dimensional tolerances. The only thing they really messed up were the ornaments in the corners and the lettering itself. Here's another Jubilee forgery lithography. It's just poor quality. Someone's decided they need to make some space paint. These are $1,000 stamps, mint. I send a block of 4, it'd be even more. But if you wanted a space filler in your catalog, this would suit just fine. But it's just the quality just isn't there in terms of the reproduction. Here's another engraved forgery, the Panelli Forgeries. Engraver was Oneglia, but distributor was Panelli. So again, we see some very good quality. The difference comes in the lettering again. We see the fives, the lettering is distinctly different, thinner, quite a bit thinner on the Panelli Forgeries. These are Oneglia Forgeries. Counterfeit. Now, these are stamps that are produced to defraud the postal authorities. Not intended really for the market. Here's one of the first ones in Canada, the 4-cent Queen Elizabeth cameo, we call it. And I can skip all the details. Bottom line is a collector noticed it, put it aside. The shade, the color was different. And when he looked at the genuine is a deeper red color, the counterfeit is a slight different color in the red. And when you look at it more closely, there's where the details come through. Deeper red color with very clear markings in the eyes. Counterfeit isn't quite as sharp, and the eye is very, very different. Counterfeit here, genuine has very distinct lines in the eyes. So the color shades are distorted due to magnification in different papers, so can't really judge the color shades in the presentation, but you can see the detail in the eye under the same magnification. Here is another stamp, the 39-cent flag. This is a whole pane of 100 counterfeit. Genuine, here's the genuine, here's the counterfeit. When you look at it again, they seem to lose a little bit again in the serif under the letters. It's not as sharp defined on these counterfeit versus compared with a genuine stamp. Here's another flag counterfeit. Again, we see the serif on the letter isn't as sharp and as clear as on a genuine stamp. This one's on cover. The counterfeit has no tagging. On cover, the counterfeit versus the genuine with GT4 tagging. Very obvious. So that was one weakness in the early issue of counterfeits. They didn't quite get the tagging right. Here's another counterfeit. It's on a Canadian Tire commercial cover. Somebody's mailing in their check to pay off their Canadian Tire credit card. And what they've done is, well, that stamp looks genuine. It is an actual stamp. Well, no, it wasn't. It wasn't an actual stamp. It was a cutout from a Canada Post issues an announcement card that describes the stamp and gives you a picture of the stamp, a reduced picture. This is actually slightly smaller than an actual. And Canada Post always puts a black line through the denomination, so you know that it's not a genuine stamp.
It looks like it's through the mail.
I went through the mail, though. Cut out from the product announcement, glued on cover. Here is a counterfeit also. This is another wonderful counterfeit. But my experience is after 20 years of storage, the glue disappeared. When I bent the booklet, preparing for the presentation, the stamps all fell off. They are now mint no gum. So the solvent that was attaching the glue, or the glue itself, has evaporated. And now there's no. So I sent this off to another expert, Leopold Baudet, and he's replied that yes, his glue has either seeped through the surface or itself became sticky. So he's had some problems and he doesn't want to take them apart anymore because the booklets are glued to each other. But on these, how do you tell them apart though? How do you tell a counterfeit booklet from a genuine? You're looking at the lettering on the Canada Post. It's a subtle difference. Which is genuine, which is counterfeit? Look at the ends of the C's and the tops of the letters. Canada Post is very particular about its brand, if you want to call it, and how it produces its words. The one on the left is the genuine. The one on the right with the pointed letters is counterfeit. But it's a pretty subtle difference here. There's another way you can also tell on that stamp. The genuine was done on a 5-color press, so you'd have 5 stoplights. The counterfeit was done on a 4-color press, and the green was produced by yellow and cyan together. And if there's a misregistration error, as you can see here, with the blue sticking out here and the yellow sticking out here, well, it was obviously done on the green was a minor registration error makes the counterfeit very obvious. So there's another way to identify. Here's a Lighthouse Definitives booklet of 10 counterfeit, and we can see the quality of the printing, the matrix used, not nearly as sharp and not as nearly as defined. So they weren't very good at reproducing those ones. These are the Lighthouse Definitives counterfeit on return to sender covers. Well, it's hard with no return address. These are people paying their city taxes or parking fines or something else, speeding tickets, sending their checks in, and decide they're going to use a counterfeit. Majority of these counterfeits all were used in the Montreal area. Here's another booklet, counterfeit, and we can see that's not very well defined. I didn't have an original booklet of that one. Here's another booklet, counterfeit and genuine. Again, we see the same issue. Counterfeit, coarse, genuine is very fine matrix. I did an interview with them. They checked 27,000 stamps from a high postal user, probably 4,000 had counterfeit stamps, just under 1%. 32 different stamps were being reproduced. Interestingly, that one of the recent trends in postal, the direction the postal going is to go to peel and stick stamps. But the peel and stick stamps is much easier now because the paper's easier to source than gum paper. Die cutting is easier than perforating, and permanent stamps are good for many years. So in going with the peel and stick options, and presumably in both Canada and the US, the postal authorities have unwittingly made counterfeiting far more profitable, easier and profitable, because the stamps now last for many years. They say most Canadian counterfeiters have been arrested in Quebec, but there's still a lot of foreign investors. And so foreign people in China are generating them. This is a wonderful, wonderful counterfeit. You really can't tell the difference now between the genuine and the counterfeit. So excellent quality, even the tagging is correct. Just that they came from China. I bought 10 of these sheets from a seller in China at far less than face value. This is a counterfeit used on cover. I mailed it to myself with proper postage still, but this is an example of a philatelic counterfeit. So genuine use, so as not to defraud Canada Post. So it's a philatelic counterfeit. Reproductions, replicas, facsimiles, whatever you want to call them. Here's a bunch of examples. This is a number 3, which is the most valuable stamp for Canadian collectors to have. It's a blank and it's a hole in most people's collections. And I cut this out from a little publication that Canada's announcing the release of the first issue of the Canada Specialized Postage Stamp Catalog, which we call the Unitrade, and in August of 73. And if you look really carefully, you can see a little bit of orange printing down there, but that's just a forgery, reproduction. Here's another reproduction of the same stamp. It was printed in red. They made it real clear this is a reproduction. Here's some more reproductions of early stamps done by lithography. Again, the quality is terrible. You can't really mistake these for genuine stamps if you have any. If you want space fillers, great. Interestingly, got perforations. Some of them are correct. This one, we're going to look at this one carefully because this particular stamp had 11 3/4 by 10.5. But what's important is here that you can see here the perforations lined up. And down here, they didn't anymore. So you knew there was a half perforation difference. And what we're looking at here on the genuine stamp, there's these other marks. The grid lines are very different. Here you can see this one here versus a horizontal here. But they did get this mark. This is a die flaw. This was on the transfer die. And this little flaw mark in the oval there is on all 17 Cartier stamps. And so they managed to use a real stamp to get that part of the image. They just didn't get the matrix at the back correct. And they're on late paper, which looks like a late paper, not moldable. They put some late paper lines on the back, but it's not genuine. Here's the Seaway invert. Canada's 5-cent Seaway with an inverted center is like your inverted Jenny. It is Canada's most popular variety, air. And this is a replica sold on eBay. He had 28 available, sold 22 of them, had $1.85. He actually took the center. He's taken the center part of one mint stamp, cut it out carefully, glued it on top of another stamp. So he's used 2 mint stamps and the effort involved. And you can see a little bit of a problem down here. He didn't get it quite in the right position, but for whatever he did, and he sells it for $1.85. Oh, here's the reproduction on first day cover. He even made first day covers for it. I know these weren't more than $5 either. What does the original genuine stamp look like? Well, here is Canada's most favorite air. This is the regular, and of course with the inverted center. This is a genuine version. This one is in my collection, but it's not. It's on a postcard. It's not loose. So I've trimmed it for the previous slide. This is one of 4 copies of this invert on postcard known with a certificate that says it's genuine. Now the miscellaneous ones. These are the interesting things. I didn't know what to call them. A 5-cent beaver. Someone went to a lot of effort to produce this stamp. It's not hand drawn. It's been printed. It's got a fake grid cancel on it. It's been scuffed a bit here. On some printed on some announcements that just arrived in arithmetic textbook or something. I want to look at it very carefully here to see how well they positioned the sun in relation to an actual stamp. So this is the top is genuine. And when I looked at it, okay, well, it's just coming through the edge of the O, yes. And horizontally, it's just coming above the edge, below the A, and between the A and the G of postage. They got the position of this fabulous. Whether or not they traced it or somehow, I have no idea how it's been created. Don't even know what to call it. But maybe it's targeting the forgery collecting market. I don't know. Here's another one. This is a Thompson, John Thompson. He's a famous Canadian painter, part of the group of 7. And this is Rudy, one of the Hamilton dealers. And is this a forgery or a fake or what is it? I mean, we look carefully, he's got the horizon line running from one to another, but this is actually 2 different stamps pasted together. Those are the 2 stamps, part of the joint Sutana issue. And he lined up the horizons perfectly and cut it down here, and he got it pretty well. He did this just to make it as an interesting collectible. Bisex reunited is what I call it. But Rudy did other things too. Philatelic fake, I guess. He used actual stamps, but to create a philatelic item. Here's an interesting one, the crown overprint from an old 3-cent small queen. Some loyalist felt very passionate about the crown and felt that Queen Victoria on this stamp from the 1880s or so, 1880s, 1890s, should have a crown. So they put that on. I presume it is illegal to put your own overprint on a stamp, but it went through the mail anyway. Here's another overprint. In the early 70s, we had a separatist movement, active separatist movement in Quebec that felt that they should separate from Canada. And they created their own stamps, first day cover. Why it was canceled in Hamilton, I don't know. Here's some other used stamps with overprints. Here's another one from Rudy. I have to laugh every time I think of him. He's such a funny fella. And I think he's just glued a stamp face down onto cover. And someone thought, of course, it was 17-cent stamp rate at the time. Postage due should be 34 cents. But somebody crossed that out and wrote, overprinted it, stamp falling off. Well, it's a mystery, but it's obviously a fake of some kind. Here we have another, this is a bogus, a fantasy country, the gay and lesbian kingdom of the Coral Sea. And this is their map. This is where they define their kingdom to be. Found in Australia's external territory, spent in 2004. In this case, it was a protest, a political protest. Fantasy country stamps have been issued for different reasons. In this case, it was they're protesting the fact that Australia passed a law about heterosexual marriages. And so they raised the flag on one island. The leader was Emperor Dale Parker Anderson. There's lots of information about this on the mail in the post. It's a bogus, obviously. Here's their flag, of course, with the rainbow colors. This whole fantasy country was dissolved in 2017 after Australia legalized same-sex marriages. And there's your reference for that. Here are their 9 stamps. I saw an advertisement in one of the stamp new magazines that if you mailed your letter to them with some money, they would send you a letter back with the stamps. So here it is, postmarked Heaven 000 from the, at that time, it was just the Gay Lesbian Kin Post Office. And when they were first printed, they just called them Gay Kingdom. But it still had to have an Australian stamp to go through the mail. And here's a letter. Another fantasy country, the Republic of Mevu, founded in 1970. And in 1973, Mevu was for a brief period ruled by the so-called national state regime. Followers of Babi and then others formed the National Liberation and regained control. This is pure philatelic, just for the sake of making stamps. A whole history about them. There's lots of information on them in the internet too. Again, bogus stamps for sure. Here's a Republic of Mevu cover, complete with very nice postal markings. Oh, they went to a lot of effort to produce some very nice looking stamps. Of course, they had to use some legitimate stamps, which they did, which are these ones down here.
Plus a free Tibet stamp.
Yeah. Oh, I missed that one. Yes. Okay. Boycott Chinese products. Okay. A political motive here for sure. On Mevu government service covered, multi-flanked with 3.4 tanos was the currency. So they canceled it 11th of December. It actually went through the Australia Post Office in April. Here's their first day cover with the first issue of 2 tanos, 4 tanos, 6, 8, and 10 tanos. This is an official first day cover. And here is the Mevu. Now, this is all part of the Antarctic Confederation of City Republics. And these are some of the cities, member cities. There's over 50 fantasy countries already listed in another presentation just on fantasy countries. But here's Mevu, and Port Maud is beside it. Gleaston is down there. Grahamia, presumably the founder's name is Graham. And this is the catalog they produce. I mean, this is serious stuff. What are they? I mean, stamp number 1 is a 25 tanos, 50 ton, whatever. And all these stamps and the ones we looked on the first day cover, they are right there. These ones, this issue here. The 2, 4, 6, 8, and 10 tanos, a blue star. They made them pretty cheap. But all these other stamps, they really went to a lot of effort. And reading about what they commemorated was sometimes interesting. One is commemorating the first railway on Antarctica. And one is commemorating, they sent soldiers to Bosnia. And so they had a field post office in Bosnia. They take it seriously, but it's fun. I can imagine for collectors. This is just, there's 10 pages here. You're not even seeing very much of it. The full Mevu government, the Mevu government for the foreign mail in late 1973 from the Okusi Ambino post office. Here's another fantasy country, and it's interesting because this guy created the Savage Republic postal stationery, and of course you had to still use proper postage, but here's an example of it. Who was it? Savage Republic was a rock band. So in this case, founded by Bob Litcher, early 80s. And this description is something incredible. Visceral, cathartic blend of punk, surf rock, industrial music, psychedelia, soundtracks, and Middle Eastern nods would have no imitator. And his was his logo. But this is an album cover. Here's another Savage Republic. hand lettering, printing a record album. They produced some Cinderella stamps for postcards. Jim Sizzle was the editor of, or one of the writers, contributors to Lynn Stamp News, who wrote about fantasy and Cinderellas in particular. He also created some other stamps. But the interesting thing about, he's an artist. For over 30 years, he created stamps. And at some point in this time, he had an exhibition, philatelic history tour called Perfect, with his artwork from 83 to 2014 on a reception. They take it very seriously. Lots of information on the WikiCon, the World Information Center for Imaginary, Created, and Oniric Nations. So those are all kinds of bogus stamps, and that concludes the presentation. Are there any questions?
When they make these stamps to defraud the various post offices, how do they get them into, like, who do they sell them to, or how do they distribute them?
They distribute them to the corner, the what we would call your corner stores, the
Oh, yeah.
convenience stores.
I also see these on ads that pop up on the internet from time to time. It'll be like 100 United States stamps of a certain value, and it'll be discount priced, which
Yep.
is ridiculous. The post office does
Yep.
not sell its stamps at a discount.
But they're getting, the quality is getting very, very good.
Yeah, that was an interesting point you made.
Dealers do sell discount postage. In the United States, a lot of people bought lots and lots of sheets of stamps, and now there's an oversupply of them. Dealers pick them up at 50% a face, and they sell them at 75% a face.
Right.
And I got like $150 worth of genuine U.S. stamps at 75% a face, and I've been using them for the last 5 years. All sorts of crazy combinations. I'm running out now, and I may have to go to the post office and get some stamps. I'm actually afraid now that I'm not sure if I'm buying discount postage or completely fake postage because there's so much of it now.
Ed, like when you're talking about discounted postage, like that Chinese websites offer really dramatic discounts. Like they offer like a roll of 100 stamps or a bundle of booklets totaling over 100 stamps for like $28.99 postpaid to you US dollars, which is just a ridiculous, unbelievable discount.
I was thinking of a similar category. You didn't quite touch on it, and that is propaganda stamps, which are
Correct.
Usually they're denigratory in tone. I'm thinking, for instance, of the skull head of Hitler, those stamps that were distributed during the latter part of World War II. And I don't think they fool anybody, but they're like the Cinderellas you're talking about.
Was that an overprint that was applied?
That was print engraved, I think, as an original stamp.
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't think I've seen one in person. Jennifer, who produced those things?
I don't know. There were actually ones that were done during the war and then reprints after the war.
Weren't they just dropped by the British or something from airplanes? I don't know.
Yeah, the originals were originally they were supposed to be this propaganda thing, but then they went to a whole bunch of reprints, and I'm not even sure which version of the reprint that I even own here. But
what does futures mean?
Shot, kaput.